Hi and welcome to Arya. This is our second video from a three-part series that we're doing on a three-pillar self-development model. The first pillar was about having a growth mindset, and we've already covered that in a previous video. We're going to move to the second video, which is all about childhood gaps that come and suddenly haunt us at the most inopportune moments. At the same time, I am playing around with my makeup and revisiting our childhood desires to paint on our face, which is probably not your desire, but it was definitely mine. And we'll see how it goes with the theme. Going along life, we see that some people just have some natural advantages that others don't. Some of those natural advantages can be as simple as a friend of yours studying last moment and just somehow knowing what's going to show up in the exam. And you think that it's down to intelligence, which it could be, but there are some rules of how you study as well. Scraped off some of the eyeshadow and it's sitting right here. Getting the presentation done is way more important than the past stuff. But if you neglect this past stuff, what will happen is that somewhere the success that you are having, like the traction that you're getting in your current success, may get capped out, and you might feel like no matter how much effort you put in your day-to-day stuff, you're not able to grow further from that. And one of the reasons why that happens is because then some of your innate, what you may call talents, but I may also call some of those early development experiences, like talents that you developed in early childhood such that they became autopilot to you, they just didn't get developed. And they can be fixed. They're just harder to fix. Like, they take a lot more intentionality and a little more patience. And they are not the things that society holds you accountable for. In pillar 3, for example, if you have a presentation to submit, or you have a job interview, or an assignment to submit, those are things that you're accountable for. Like, you know that you have to do this, and then if you don't do it, you're either punished or not rewarded. You're kind of losing something by not doing those things, very evidently. But here, the things that you're losing are very hidden. They attack you and you don't even realize. I've been doing all this mixing, by the way. There are different development milestones that you're supposed to hit at different stages of your life. 0 to 7, where you're learning stuff like counting, addition, subtraction, you're learning how to sort of put words together, and like early speech, interacting with early friendships. Some people struggle with that. Like, I struggle with the 0 to 7 development milestones. And then some people have compensated, say someone like me, and I have compensated for the 7 to 12 development milestones. Then there are some advanced level ones, such as advanced writing, algebra, and calculus and stuff like that, which also I had become really good at. I don't know if I'm still good at it, but some critical thinking skills and deep reading comprehension skills and stuff was something that I kind of mastered. But my early period was something that was somewhat left behind. It was just certain events happened at that stage of my life, certain experiences that are like micro level traumas that at the time I didn't even know were traumas. And it just led me into having 2 or 3 really early stage communication and mathematical weaknesses. For me, writing and reading was never an issue. Like, it was something that I was just naturally really good at, because at that stage of life, when I was going through all those tiny little these issues that I'm talking about, I used to seek solace in reading, and for me, reading just became one of those strengths. So now, if someone met me at the age of 18, they would think that I have a few natural advantages, and reading would be one of them. They would think that I'm really good at math because I was really good at the math of that period. Algebra was like my strongest suit. You give me very complicated questions and I'll just find ways to connect and prove things. There were some things that were still barriers for me. So like, I'll do this high level algebra, but then at the end of the answer, when it's +7 -5, I'll just end up doing something like 3, which would be incorrect. Basic calculation, which was the 0 to 7 age group stuff that I was supposed to learn, was sort of neglected. I didn't know that there was a root cause to it. I just thought that, yeah, I make silly mistakes. So like, I'm just slow with my counting and stuff. But it was only when I realized that it's been a gap since childhood that it really dawned upon me that I need to slow down and revisit that version of me. And that revisiting can happen in multiple ways. There are slightly more spiritual ways, not spiritual, but like new age ways of dealing with it. Some of those include a lot of inner child work, a lot of other kind of work as well. Like you find books from that era and you address it through the curriculum of that time. You can find games. For my case, I found this app called King of Math or Math King, and I made it a game. Basically, I found a nice app that really gamifies math, and it was basic, like, school kids use that math app. And I just decided I'm gonna really go after it. I'm gonna do the kindergarten level math, and I'm gonna make it almost autopilot so that when I am confronted with that calculation, that animal part of my brain or that little childhood part of my brain doesn't just suddenly go into a frenzy and shut down. It shouldn't just suddenly collapse. I kept gamifying it. I kept practicing a lot. There was also some inner child work that I was doing on the side. I don't want to get into that much. A lot of people don't relate to that kind of stuff, so I don't want to talk about it too much. It kind of coincides with the mindsets category, all this inner child work. The idea for me was to go back in time of that 0 to 7-year-old experiences of mine, talk to myself and work on the fears that I had developed, the phobias that I had developed around certain things. Communication was also one of those things. If you remember in the previous video, I had told you about how talking on a stage would really give me massive stage fright. One of the reasons why that stage fright existed was because whenever I was nervous, that early 0 to 7-year age group trauma used to just kick in, and it used to make me freeze. And for a lot of people, they've had these awkward experiences, right? Like, we've all been made fun of at some point in our lives. We've all been scolded for underperforming sometimes. I was also in an all-girls convent school. We had nuns that taught us. This is back in Chandigarh. They were mean, okay? I was terrified of school. I can't explain how terrified. Like, I got nightmares of that school years after I left that school. It took a lot of work. Some of that came in the way of all my hard work of today. Like, I didn't know that you can address some of these things via therapy. So what I did was my own version of exposure therapy, whether it was through like saying yes and signing up for opportunities, which was the first, like the mindset category that we were talking about, which also kind of links to this one, because even for this you need the growth mindset that it's not that I'm born with this. Beyond a certain set of resources that I cannot change, I refuse to accept that I can't do it, or I'm low IQ and that's why I can't do it, or my math is bad and that's why I can't do it, or this or that. In my sister's case, her trauma was not around calculations. She would struggle more with the algebra piece and I would struggle more with the addition and subtraction piece. Her 0 to 7 period was nicer, the dream childhood. I wish I had it. But her early adolescence, which is where you learn some of those foundations of algebra, a lot of early adolescent stuff was left behind for her. Because of that, for her, the way of fixing things is slightly different. Language is one more way that this can manifest, by the way. Communication is different than language. Like, I can read and write really well, but say, am I articulate enough, or am I able to talk in a way that others really understand? It really hits home. Am I charming in my conversations? That is subject to a lot of your other experiences and exposures that you've had. Honestly, it looks kind of ugly right now. We'll see. Even within communication, there are like these certain things that you end up missing out on. Now the question is, how do you identify whether something is just a lack of natural talent or a lack of something that you were not able to develop during your childhood? The first step is to just find your natural strengths and weaknesses. People always talk about finding your unfair advantage and working towards it, and I'm all for it. I do think that that's the most efficient way to go about it. But I have, at various stages of my life, found the opposite to also be quite useful, where you find your natural disadvantages, the ones that are more skill related, talent related. When you find those natural disadvantages, they are usually a clue into what stage of your life did you neglect a certain growth experience. Maybe when unitary method was being taught in school, you had chicken pox, so you had to stay home for a week, and it was just a concept that you never could ever catch up on, and you were able to cover up. It's just one of those things that you've not naturally worked on a lot. Another way would be identify how at each stage of your life there are certain development milestones, and I'll list them down over here, like what is relevant for each age group. And then think about whether your family went through some sort of a trauma, whether you went through some bad experience. It could be anything, like some abusive experience at a certain stage of your life. See if something adds up. If your skills around that period of your life are just weaker. It's quite possible that if your skills on the other period of your life are quite solid, then you probably have more potential than you have let yourself believe. The next thing is to then decide whether you actually want to work on those things that you missed out on, because it's quite possible that at the current stage of life that you're at, those skills are not even relevant. So like for me, mind-body coordination, or like hand-eye coordination that is required for dancing was very important, because for me, dancing was something I was required to do as a part of my entertainment career. And it was something that I really had to go after and fix, because it was coming in the way of me having a great professional life today. So you don't need to go and really chase everything that went wrong in your childhood, but if you identify the gaps based on what could be barriers today, that's the thing that you would want to address now. Find out what's troubling you. And if you don't find out what's troubling you because you don't have that depth of, like you've never had that kind of a conversation with yourself, then you may want to consider looking at what were some crucial, like sad moments, or like tough events in your life growing up, or like any bad experiences and memories, and whether they've created any sort of a wound around your present day learning. Once you have it identified, and once you've identified what stage of life these issues are coming from, you then find very elementary ways of fixing it, which may include finding apps, like toddler apps literally if needed, that sort of gamify learning some of those skills that you had missed out on earlier in a very safe, judgment-free sort of an environment. And you really go after it. Like you literally say, like, I'm not gonna let you haunt me. And I was trying to make a wavy line. That did not look good. Sometimes just knowing that this is something which is a childhood issue, and if you practice it enough, you'll be able to resolve it. As long as you're able to work on the fear aspect of it. A lot of times you don't even have to work on it. Like you can just work on the third pillar, and the third pillar usually involves some of these skills anyway. So just by practicing pillar 3, especially if you're short on time, like say if you're in the peak of recruitment season, then you're not gonna open kindergarten algebra. Like you'll practice the questions that are relevant to that time, but you'll do it with an awareness. So this is something that sort of comes in my way a lot, and I want to address it. You will actually be able to address it. Like when I did my GMAT prep is when my calculation phobia kind of went away. And then further, when I did my consulting prep for job interviews and stuff, it sort of really disappeared, at least temporarily. And the thing about some of these childhood ones is that you may have to revisit them more frequently. They'll take a lot of active effort and reminders, because your brain is not as plastic as it was at that early development stage. So yes, it will be a natural disadvantage. It just won't be your roadblock. Rest of it, I think, if you can figure out therapy, then you should, because like I think anyone can benefit of therapy. Unless you're like that kind of a person who can just do these things without overthinking, like live life and doesn't have to face the perils of introspection, then more power to you. Maybe one could wear something like this on Halloween. The point of doing this was just to have fun with all the face paint stuff that I had, and to sort of match the theme. We were kind of going back into our childhood with the video, so I guess this kind of goes with the vibe, you know. Too much light. Washed.